What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the ARC Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Zachary. And for those of you who are new tuning in, thank you. This is the Athletes Resilience Center podcast, where we talk all things mental performance in sports. We have a great episode for you this week. We interview Colin Jonov, who is a former football player at Bucknell and Pitt, and has now shifted his endeavors into the Athletic Fortitude, where he talks about performance mindsets with athletes and former athletes. In this episode, we go through Colin's journey through sport, starting in high school, his transition into playing football at Bucknell, being an all-conference nominee, then shifting over to playing at Pittsburgh, then shifting after that over into getting an opportunity with the Bills, and then transitioning into his professional life and what he's doing today. Overall, this is a great episode. We talk about a lot of different great mindset techniques that you can implement into your daily lives, kind of going over goals, outcomes, your process, and everything in between. So really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Colin, I am fired up to have you here today. How we doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to having our conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. Me too. I'll lead right into it, just like we normally do on the ARC podcast here. I'll kick it back to you, and I'll just kind of let you introduce yourself very briefly, and then go into the story of your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, nah, I appreciate it. I think throughout the athletic journey, I think there's always different points and pivots that get you to where you end up being. And, there's moments in my time life right now or moments in my life right now that'll determine where I am in another 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the overall experience, of my life is athletics have really been part of who I am since I can remember. I have distinct memories from being 3, 4 years old and watching Super Bowls, with my parents and being invested as a very, very young kid. Like, just have those distinct memories and, played throughout as, most, Division 1, 2, or 3, athletes. Started playing sports when I was a young age, played football, baseball, basketball pretty much throughout my life, throughout my athletic career. And for me, it really became the sole point of my identity. And so then as I transitioned into higher levels when I got to college and performance wasn't as consistent, as it was when you're in high school and middle school where it's, relatively easy for you. I started to struggle with I don't want to say negative feedback that I was giving myself, but my performance wasn't at the level that I wanted to be. And it always felt like an attack on me, the person. And at the time, I didn't understand kind of where that came from or why it was, but it started really stealing my joy from the game. And I was a successful college athlete. I played football at Bucknell. Had the opportunity to start as a freshman. Every single game I was healthy for, I started throughout my college career. So for me, like, even though I was having perceived success, internally it wasn't up to my own standard. Had severe nerves, and I don't like to call it anxiety. I'm very particular with my words, but it was really hard to enjoy playing because I had this just overarching cloud over top of me. I was always questioning my performance. Fortunately, was able to just through the maturation process at Bucknell, handle things differently. Had a good career there and took the opportunity to pursue at a higher level. Graduated from Bucknell, played my 5th year at the University of Pittsburgh. And, through my experiences there, up and down year at the University of Pittsburgh, some really high highs, some really low lows. Was fortunate enough to turn that into an opportunity, with the Buffalo Bills that started on a Thursday, ended on a Sunday. So I was there for 4 whopping days. But why that part of my journey is so important is, when I got cut and my athletic career officially ended, the only way I know how to describe it, and I say this a lot when people ask, but until I learn another way to describe it, I'll keep describing it this way. But it was like, a piece of me died that day, knowing that my career was over. And so in that ensuing time period, I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped working out. I stopped eating properly. I was just sitting in this cesspool of negativity and it was, eroding my joy day to day. And it got to a point, probably about a month, where I was like, I can't live like this. I can't do this every day. Like I have to figure out what's going on with me. And so that's where I came to the root core of like identity. Everyone says your sport isn't who you are, it's what you do. But how many people can actually help you answer who are you? And there's complexities to that, right? It's very, deep in understanding who you are, but at a simple level, right? I had to understand who I was. I had to start answering that question. And so through talking with former teammates, through talking with guys who are still playing, professionally, talking with coaches, talking with family, talking with sports psychologists, really coming to understand that, hey, at the end of the day, how we handle everything in life, the complete human experience really starts with who you are. And so I created my company and then, my podcast and then my newsletter around that concept of identity in athletics, identity in life, and really the experiences and how you deal with life that comes from there.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I just love how open you are about like your journey and kind of the struggles that you faced and how much weight you kind of put into your athletic identity. I think so many people can relate to that. I know myself as well. I went to a smaller D3 school and played baseball, but again, the aspirations were always playing professional baseball, right? Like that was the dream and that was the goal, and I was gonna try to stop at nothing in order to achieve that because my identity was so tied to baseball and being a baseball player, and like you said, I think the very unique thing that you also stated was you had success at Bucknell, but there was that level of like perceived success in your own head where it's like almost wasn't good enough, And I feel like sometimes in the athletic culture and sphere that we live in, it's almost like never be content, never be content. And to a certain extent, it's like, well, then you're never really stopping and smelling the roses when there is a level of success, right? And it's hard to build off of those successes if you aren't really like looking back at them and saying, okay, like I did see success here. Now, how can I grow on this while also enjoying being able to live in that moment rather than just like, it's never good enough. It's never good enough. It's never good enough. Now, did you realize this while you were at Bucknell, or did it take kind of years for you to take a peek back and be like, you know what, this is something that I definitely was dealing with at that time?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different complexities and it's a nuanced discussion and things that factor in kind of how you're thinking in the moment of things. It was definitely something I had to understand later in life as opposed to what I understood in the moment. And I think in the moment, when you are this successful athlete, a lot of it comes from like ego, like how you're
Big
handling
time.
the successes or failures. And when I date back to high school, the reality is like I did have a lot of adversity in my life, like personal injury, sports wise. But like at the end of the day, like sports were pretty easy for me. At like in my town, in and we played in a competitive league, but like football, like was relatively easy. And so then when you go to that next level and you get smacked in the face and you realize like I'm probably not as good as I thought. Even though like I said, the perceived
Yeah.
success of starting as a true freshman, like I played every game with unbelievable doubt. I think now you look back, you'd probably call it imposter syndrome. But like it's hard to go from things being really easy, even if you do work hard, even if you do have, adversity in your life, to then things being very, very hard, very different from what you're used to. And so for me, that was a shock. And a lot of it was ego based. Like I said, I think everybody that comes from whatever town that they're from was the best athlete. That's all they talk to about everybody. And so anything that feels like a threat to that identity becomes, an overarching theme of your life where you're trying to figure out in that time frame, like if I fail, everyone's going to think this about me. And you begin to catastrophize. And so later in my life, I was able to go back and, be able to dissect myself through. And obviously, your memory's a little foggy,
Yeah.
you remember details a little bit differently,
Yep.
but you're able to kind of go and pinpoint things, be like, oh, this is what I was experiencing here. This is what I would have done differently.
Yeah. Can you kind of dive in maybe into the importance of facing that adversity once you got to Bucknell? Even though, like you said, you were able to start, but it's almost like a wake up call. Because I know, same thing with me, you kind of described exactly what I had felt like in high school. I was a late bloomer, and then going into my senior year, like I pitched a ton and I had some success in high school. And then going into college, right? It's that ego that's like, all right, like I'm gonna be one of the guys on the team now. Like even though I'm a freshman, I'm gonna make my statement. And you realize really quick, like, all right, the college game is much different than the high school level game, right? But can you kind of dive into maybe the importance of facing that adversity early on in your collegiate career?
Yeah, I think adversity is necessary. It's really important. It's a part of every journey, whether you like it or not, whether you anticipate it coming. Adversity is going to come to you at some point in some, form, in some, fashion. And so if you look at, and I'm like a big fan of lions, okay? Like they're my favorite
Yeah.
animal, like
Yep.
love, just like king of the jungle, right? But you look at like the king of a pride. There is not a single lion that does not have scars and scratches and did not take some type of beating, right? And the reality is, if you want to get to or elevate to a certain point in your athletic career and your personal life, you're going to have to take some scars. You're going to have to lose, right? You're going to have to experience failure. You're going to have to go through things off the field in your personal life. Those things are coming. Now, you don't want to wish those things upon yourself, but just
Of
with the
course.
understanding that those are coming. And so the earlier and more often you can experience those things, the more you can develop a skill set adequate to handle future challenges. And like I said off air when we were talking like about having kids, you like your problems with kids, and I'm about to have my third. So I feel like I can kind of speak to it, right? No
Of
one's an
course. Yeah,
expert,
definitely.
but the problems don't become easier, they become harder. You just become more equipped to deal with them. And it's the same thing in athletics, it's the same thing in life, it's the same thing with building a business. The more you grow, the bigger your problems actually become. You just develop a higher skill set to conquer those problems. And it's the same thing with adversity. The more adversity I can experience early on, later I'm going to become that much more equipped to deal with the greater adversities that come.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that just leads over, you use the perfect example of like sports transitioning over into life, because the people that have the most success are the people that are the most resilient, right? The people that can bounce back from those um, obstacles because they had that in the past and they were able to develop those skills, like you said. And again, I think a big misconception too is a lot of coaches or athletes will even be like, you either have it or you don't. Even when it comes to like something like overcoming adversity, it's like either have it or you don't. Where I'm a firm believer, and I'm sure you are too, that you can build that skill set to become more resilient, to have the toolbox, in order to overcome any obstacles that do come your way. Was there anything during your time at Bucknell that you can remember looking back to that even you might not have like implemented it very intentionally, but maybe some mental practices that, you were able to put in place that kind of helped you out during your time there?
I think one thing, and to real quick touch on like your point, hey, you can build those skill sets. You absolutely can build those skill
Yeah.
sets. I think one thing we need to do across the board is understand our genetics. Not an easy thing to do
Yeah.
in terms of what that means, but know
Right.
what your predispositions are. Know and create that self awareness. Ask yourself tough questions, right? And evaluate yourself. How have I handled adversity in the past? Is this something that comes natural to me or something that I have to work harder at? Because in every skill or genetic trait in life, we all have varying, like very, very varying different natural tendencies to something.
Right.
And so we have to be aware of that. And you absolutely can develop that skill set, but understand if you're starting on first base or third base and how much attention that you need to give to that specific area to grow in that space. If I look at Bucknell in particular, what would I take that I learned? And I would say I really developed kind of that not like the don't quit mindset. And there were a lot of times in my athletic career that I never really talk about, but specifically through the lens of injury, where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm sick
Yeah.
of putting my body through this.
Right.
I'm done with the broken bones, the surgeries, like, it's impacting my day to day, right? And then you let the emotions pass, right? And you let yourself experience it. You let yourself sit in those thoughts. You don't push them away. You don't hide them. You just experience them, and then quickly you'll learn as a competitor. You can get in and out of that space pretty quickly, and then it flips from being that victimhood mindset to no, like this isn't how my career is going to end. This isn't how I'm going to leave this game. I'm going to leave this game. I may not make it as far as I want, but I'm going to leave on my own terms in the sense of
Yeah.
I'm not going to let some type of random factor force me to quit. And so that's where, like, I would say if I were to examine my Bucknell career, the one thing, mentally or like some skills that I applied was just really adopting that don't quit mentality and to just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and my co-host Matt and I have talked about this in previous episodes. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit. Is like when you're going through those struggles, also going back to your why. Because again, like you said, I'm sure a lot of the times when you were going through those like injuries, those obstacles, like there are plenty of times where you looked yourself in the mirror and it's like, is this all worth it? But at the end of the day, kind of coming up with well, this is why I play the game. I love to play the game, and I have this kind of aspiration for myself to be the best version of myself I can possibly be. Like identifying that why, kind of going into like your idea of reevaluating yourself and understanding your, I guess, shortcomings versus where you have strengths in is really important. I know you've talked about it previously, and I've seen on your website you kind of refer to it as like auditing yourself, like understanding where those weaknesses come from and like I guess working on those and trying to make things into more strengths for yourself, if that makes sense. Like again, I think that's really important because whether it's football or baseball, what like I'm the field I'm more comfortable in, I guess. If you have weaknesses on the mound as a pitcher, right? Like those are things that week over week you should be able to try to continue to work on. So then by the end of the season, it might not even be a weakness anymore. It's something that, is another addition to your tool belt. So I'd kind of love for you to go into like this idea that you've even said like of auditing yourself and kind of looking at your weaknesses and kind of putting a plan in place of how to, I guess, overcome those weaknesses or develop them a little bit better, because I feel like that's a really unique and I guess important conversation to have with a lot of athletes.
Yeah, so I would say a couple different things. It is really important to audit yourself, understand your weaknesses, and learn how to develop those. I would also say there's a really important component of knowing where your strengths and like your unique strengths lie. Because if you understand where your most unique traits are, meaning it's harder for other people to replicate or duplicate them, then you can really lean into those, whether it's athletic again or whether it's off the field. If you have unique strengths, like you're super fast, or as a pitcher, you're really long. And even though you may not be throwing 99, your arm's closer to the plate, so it feels like it's getting on you quicker.
Yeah.
Right. And really understanding where some of those strengths lie, then you can double down, right? You can double, triple down and turn those into like superpowers to where even if you do have some weaknesses, because we all do,
Of
those are
course.
really masked by your superpowers. And then once you really dominate that space, then we can, again, through periods of auditing and creating that self awareness, then we can go back, right? And we can really put time and effort into increasing our weaknesses or building upon our weaknesses. And you need to invest time in each space. It's just, hey, what time or how much time am I putting into this right now? And you have to understand you only have so much time as an athlete.
Of course.
So you have to know, okay, in this period of training, I'm going to spend more time developing my strengths. That doesn't mean I'm not putting time into my weaknesses. It's just a little bit less time. And then there'll be a period of time where it's like, hey, I'm really working on developing some of these weaknesses to get a better base. And some of my strengths I'm not going to be working on those as much. I am going to put time and make sure that those are maintained, but I'm really going to be focusing on elevating my weaknesses right now. And so I think that's a really important component in the self auditing, is not just understanding where strengths and weaknesses are, but understanding when am I going to allocate time to each space.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Matt and I have talked about like creating priority lists for athletes where like on a day-to-day basis it's like, all right, the most of my time that I need to be allocating towards are these specific things, and again, like could be geared towards those strengths on certain weeks, and then like you said, maybe there's other times of the year where it's like, all right, well, maybe it's the off season and it's like some of these weaknesses is I do really need to work on, but then you're in season and it's like, all right, maybe I need to lean into my strengths a little bit more and spend more time doing that. So I think that's, really important and crucial to athletes. But I guess moving into your transition into going from Bucknell to Pitt, right? Like again, like you said, the transition from high school to playing collegiate football, and now going from Bucknell to go and play in the ACC. I mean, that's a really big jump as well. Do you mind kind of going into that shift? Because I'm sure your role changed going from a football player at Bucknell to now a football player at University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and it is a really detailed and nuanced conversation. And I've said that a few times today, but I like to approach most situations in life. They're not very black and white. There's a lot of gray.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can apply nuance to discussions, the more that we can kind of understand why certain decisions lead a certain way. And so for me, to be honest, I would have came back to Bucknell for a fifth year,
Yeah.
but the university itself, they don't do fifth years. So I would have had to take
Okay.
a semester off and then come back and then graduate that following winter instead of graduating in the spring of 2018. And I
Right.
just didn't want to do that. I wanted to graduate with the guys, that I came in without having to leave campus. Like, I don't know what I would have done for that period of time. Like, would I've,
Yeah.
gone home and, worked some job, and I just didn't want to do that. So I wanted to enjoy my time with the guys I came in, finish that out, see it through together. And then, for me, it was not one of those things, because I think transferring in particular right now is just a really hot topic.
Big time.
I think for me, it was I had accomplished everything that I could have at the FCS level, or that not that I could have, right? But I proved to myself what I needed to at that level. So for
Right.
me to go to
Yeah.
a Villanova or Western Illinois or some of these other places, like, I wouldn't have really proved anything further to myself. And so for me, I looked at it, I'm like, okay, let's see if I can make a jump at the next level. And my uncle's a head coach at the University of Westminster. He has a lot of connections in the coaching world. And so ultimately we put together, my highlight film, put it out to some schools and garnered some interest, which obviously, creates further proof of myself. Hey, maybe I can play at this level. And so it really came down to, right, going to Pitt or Penn State. Ended up going to Pitt, grew up a Pitt fan my whole life. Just felt like the right opportunity for me. But I think my mentality and mindset going in, which was very different than Bucknell. And had I been going to Pitt as a freshman, I probably wouldn't have handled it as well. And that's why I talk about experiencing that adversity early on, because when I got to Pitt, the mindset shift changed. It was not about anything other than I'm in this to prove this to myself, not to my parents, not to, my fiance at the time, my wife now, not to the people in my neighborhood. It's for me and for me only to challenge myself. I know there's going to be ups and downs. And for me, it was solely, can I prove this to myself? And if I can't, then I can't. I can at least sleep peacefully at night knowing that I tried. And that's like the humility that I kind of came in with. And like I always say, there's this balance between irrational confidence and humility. And I was hovering that line pretty well at that point in time. And so I was able to come in with the humility, but with the confidence, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to make an impact, I'm going to do all these things. If I don't, that's fine, but I'm coming with this mindset, I'm going to do everything I can. And to be honest, I was tested really early, because when I came in, right, day one, I was nowhere to be found on the depth chart.
Mm.
I'm there, I'm in classes, I'm enrolled, I can't back out now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things. You get two choices. You either quit or you push forward. I chose to push forward, ended up lettering, and like I said, getting an opportunity at the next level.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I guess your time at Pitt, right, during that season, like you said, you were kind of nowhere to be found on the depth chart. And obviously that's much different from your time at Bucknell having success and then starting right away, right? Like, can you go into, I guess, the feelings that you had like immediately after seeing that, and then as you've progressed through the season? Because I know, like you just said, you kind of teetered on that balance of having humility, but also kind of a little bit of that irrational confidence in a good way. But, I'm sure week to week that changes, right? Like you're probably training every week with the goal in mind to like start or get your opportunity. And like you said, if the opportunities weren't coming as much as maybe they were at Bucknell, I'm sure that's much different for you, right? So how did that look like week to week for you while you were, in season at Pitt?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, the feelings, right? Feelings are real, but feelings do lie to you. And so for me,
Big time.
in those moments, like sitting back and like thinking about how I felt in those moments, oh, I mean, you're crushed, right? And
Yeah.
like those are real. Like I care a lot. Like, like I think if there's anything that someone would say to you for any of my coaches, it'd be, I cared a lot and I did everything I could.
Yeah.
And when you're not playing, right. And that's why I said I wouldn't have handled it well as an 18-year-old.
Of
But,
course. Yeah.
as a 22, 23-year-old, I have that maturation process. And so it literally became, okay, I'm going to show everybody here that I'm capable of being a starter. Right. And there's multiple points throughout my Pitt career in a short period of time where it was my Super Bowl. And I think there were the two early on periods within the first month I was there that I created opportunity for myself where I started earning the respect of people around me. Because I walk in, okay, I'm 5'9", okay, I don't have long arms, right? Like most people, like I walk into an ACC facility, people aren't thinking twice about me. Okay,
Yep.
let's make that loud and
Yeah.
clear. Well, so there was two times, right? So there was like for the transfers, okay, because there was me and a couple other kids transferring in. One of them ended up being an all ACC tackle, okay? And there was a sled push thing, and it was me and him on each side. And it was assistant strength coach says to him, like, hey, don't lap Colin here. Like, let's not go in circles. And yeah, like that, rightfully so. Like,
Yeah.
He's 6'4", 300 pounds, right? I'm 5'9", 190 pounds.
Of course.
And through the sled pushing, like I was right there with him the whole time, right? Like just line by line, like was side by side. And that's kind of when I started earning the strength staffs, like respect. Like they're like, okay, like this, like he's in shape. He's going to work hard. Like haven't seen him do anything football wise, but like, we at least know that we have a kid that's going to work hard. Number two, and this is the real one. Okay. Talking about knowing your strengths and weaknesses, like I'm fast, like I can run. And I knew the second I got the opportunity, and I forget where I like heard this, someone talked about it and they were like, hey, if you are fast, anytime you have the opportunity to show that you're fast, show that you're fast. And it just like stuck with me for some reason. I was like, okay, I have this skill set. I should put it on display any chance I get. And so we had not run sprints up to this point. Well, boom, competition day. Everybody's lining up with their position group to race. And I'm like, this is my chance. This is my opportunity. And boom, first one, I'm second. Okay. And there was like 10 of us. I'm second. And everyone's like kind of like looking around like, okay, maybe it was a fluke. Sprint 2, boom, I'm second again. And everyone again starts like looking around. Corner coach comes up to our all ACC corner. I was like, what are you doing losing here? Third, boom, I'm second again. And so now, people like are like actually noticing, like teammates are like talking. Yeah. And I go and line up next to the only person that kept beating me, and he beat me again, but like we ended up running like 6 or something. I finished second every single time. And later we like I think the next day we do like a hard workout, and it's one where our strength coach is like coming down on us. And he gives this like speech. I didn't know. He just like out of nowhere pulls and says my name and is like, he's finishing second, like in all the sprints with the defensive backs. And he's like, maybe Colin's a guy that can help us this year. And so then Narduzzi pulls me aside and like, you'd have to be a Pitt guy to understand, but he's like munching on like a snack after practice. And he's like, so Colin, he's like, you can run with these guys. And I was like, yeah, I can. And so like the point of that story is it started off so bad at Pitt. Like I walk in day one, it's like, I'm nowhere to be found. Like people don't know who I am. Like I have no chance. I'm basically like a manager of the water boy.
Yeah.
But I took the opportunity to seek out times where I could be like, this is my opportunity to prove myself.
Right.
I have a strength here. I'm going to utilize it. I'm going to put it on display and let the chips fall where they may. And you do that. And then every single play in practice, like I didn't care what period it was. I didn't care if it was walk through, jog through. I didn't care if it was special teams, offense, defense. I was the little macadamia nut flying down the field as fast as I could, and I became known for that. And so that's really how I kind of like earned my respect. And then I think a really important note for some of the young guys that may listen to this, or somebody in college right now who's maybe not the star player, right? Like I became the coach speak MVP of my role.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
quickly found out I was not going to be in the defensive rotation. So I'm like, okay, I can either whine and complain about this, or I can do the next best thing. Next best thing, I became a special teams guy. I was like a special teams, like I had like the roles and responsibilities of like a special teams guy. And so for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best special teams player I can be. And I was, and I utilized that, and I became a fixture in that special teams lineup. And I became someone that was dependable, right? And I became someone who they highlighted in film room from time to time. And to be able to do that is incredibly important. You know, I served a role, and it's something I didn't appreciate when I was the star player because I hadn't experienced that yet. But then when I got to experience it, I got to realize how fun special teams was and how important that role was. And I think you have to understand kind of where you fall on the totem pole, how you can create new opportunities. But at the end of the day, whatever your role is, be the MVP of that role. You can never expand into another.
Yeah. I think the two biggest takeaways that I really appreciate from your transition into Pitt, one being it seems like you were very process driven, where it's like every rep, every day, I'm going to try to make the most out of this and crush this opportunity rather than being outcome driven in the sense like I'm gonna do this so then on Saturdays I am the starting DB. It's like you were doing it to not just prove to people, it was to prove to yourself that it's like, you know what, I know that I belong here, I stay here. So what can you control? It's every day in practice your level of energy and effort, right? And that's like number one most important thing you can do. And like you said, focusing on, all right, these are my strengths. Now I'm going to go showcase it. And that's awesome because again, I feel like where athletes get into a little bit of trouble is when they're trying to do things on the day-to-day level. So it's like, all right, well, if I, from the pitcher's lens, if I go out and throw a bullpen today, on Sunday, like I'll be ready to go. It's like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is to go out today and get better with no desired outcome besides every day just getting better. Because then slowly that's going to build to the outcome that you want in the future, of course, right? Like you just said, you're not on the depth chart, and then every day you're showing everyone, look at me, how hard I work, right? You're grinding. And it was for yourself, you're enjoying it. And then that led to opportunities on special teams, right? And an appreciation for that. And then I think the second big takeaway too that you mentioned was I think everything happens for a reason. I'm a really big believer in that. And your journey of getting to Pitt, saying you grew up a Pitt fan, if you were out of high school and went to Pitt and had this, I guess, story of committing to Pitt out of high school, having that adversity your first year, like you said, you don't know if you would have been able to deal with it. You might now be looking back and been like, you know what? Screw Pitt. I hate Pitt. Whatever. Like you would have completely flipped the script in your head. But having those experiences at Bucknell before reaching what looked like your dream school, right? To build you in that moment. And it's like, wow, what an opportunity you have to be able to play at the school that you looked up to and grew up watching. Like it's just a really cool journey and kind of an awesome perspective that you shared there.
Yeah, I think a couple different things to really build upon what you're saying is to say I was not outcome driven, or to say I'm still not in some shape or form outcome driven. Like I do think outcomes matter, but
Yeah,
outcomes are
definitely.
a byproduct of the things that you do.
100%.
And it also goes back, you talk about, knowing your why. And that is like a particular conversation where I sometimes feel like gets hijacked, a little bit. I don't think you need to write down a why. I think you will naturally know what you're motivated and drawn to do. And I do believe I'm someone actually who believes in motivation as well. Now I believe in discipline, consistency, but there will be things that you will do irrational activities for to achieve something just because it's something you're drawn to. And so, I unpack my own self and like, why did I love football, right? That was a process I had to go through. Why did I love athletics? And, for me, it's, I love a mental, physical, and emotional challenge. Like at its root core, those are the things that I love. That's what I'm drawn to. But from like the identity in the athletics perspective, right? I think I did two things really well just naturally, is maybe naturally, but adaptation. I grew into this. is I kind of remember two distinct conversations with my stepfather. I remember sophomore year at Bucknell, I was playing with a broken shoulder, a separated shoulder, and a torn labrum. Okay. And I was awful. Like, by all metrics, like, I was a bad football player. I was still starting. I think it was one of those situations where the coaches knew my potential. They were just trying to string me along. Like, hey, we got to just keep him in there, try and get him healthy. I also don't know if they actually knew how bad my shoulder was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting, it was either alumni or family night. I forget what it was, but we had just lost to Georgetown, which, like, that doesn't, like, Georgetown, not was, at least at the time, I don't know how they are now. We were awful and we lost at home. And I'm like, I just remember sitting there with my stepfather, and he's giving all the excuses for me, like, you're playing with one arm, like, all this. I'm like, and I remember just sitting there and being like, it's not an excuse. Like, I'm out there, like, I have to play better. And I remember him tearing up, and, like, my little brother's a little spoiled, but he hit him, and he's like tearing up, and basically just like told him, like, you hear that, you're listening. And, like, that was like a moment, like, I didn't recognize it at the time, but when I reflect back, like, I'm proud of that version of myself. And then the second time was similarly after Pitt. Like, I'm only a special teams guy. We're playing, we lose a game, and he starts going off, and, like, he's my stepdad, right? Saying, like, these DBs suck, like, you should be playing. Meanwhile, I think like 6 of, like, the 10 guys in that room are still in the NFL today. Okay. But I just, like, I said, like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, like, do I feel I'm better than some of the guys in the room? Yeah, of course. That's that irrational confidence piece. I was like, but I haven't done a good job of showing that beyond reasonable doubt. Like, I'm like, this is like this industry. It's like, hey, you play to win or you're gone. Like, you're fired. I was like, I just haven't proven beyond reasonable doubt I'm better than person X, Y, or Z. I'm like, I've only been here for 4 months, and I just didn't do a good job in that 4 months. And so, like, that ownership and that accountability piece, talking about kind of those audits, that awareness, like, I'm good in those spaces, right? I'm good at owning the outcome. And then I can go back and I can adjust my process to get better outcomes. And so that's, like, I think something really important to know. Hey, do I have a good base at taking accountability, or is that something I need to improve on? Right. And then being able to ask yourself those tough questions, answer them honestly, and begin to put together a process for yourself to get better.
Yeah, no, and I think your career just as a whole athletically kind of demonstrates your success and ability to be able to do that, right? And then, transitioning now from Pitt into your experience with the Bills, right? Like you said, just would you say Thursday to Sunday was the
Thursday to
opportunity,
Sunday,
right?
baby, 4 days.
So I'd love you to kind of go into detail about, I guess, how that opportunity arose, and then the experience you had, like, within those 4 days, and kind of the mindset you went into, I guess, like, camp with the Bills there.
Yeah. So, fortunately, when I was at Bucknell, one of my coaches had played in the NFL for many years, won a Super Bowl with the Steelers. He had an agent. And I had actually expressed maybe interest in becoming a sports agent one day.
Okay.
So I interned, or he's like, hey, would you want to intern with my agent? And I was like, heck yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I interned with him. Okay. Long story short, my football career ends at Pitt. And I'm like, I still got an itch. Like, might as well prep for the pro day, see what opportunities I can get. Like, I don't want my career to end yet.
Yeah.
I understand it's a long shot. I know I'm going to test well, right? Like, don't have a ton of film at Pitt other than special teams, but I have my Bucknell career and I know I'm going to test well. So my agent's like on board, like, all right, let's do it. We'll give you a shot. Okay. I have one of the better pro days out of my senior class. Okay. Flash forward there. So ironically enough, like, I know I'm not getting drafted. I know I'm not going to be like a signed free agent. I'm hoping to be like the rookie tryout guy. And so Avengers Endgame was debuting that week. And some of my best friends from Bucknell at the time were also huge Marvel fans like myself.
Yeah, me too.
And so we planned to go see the debut at like midnight or whatever it was. And then the next day they surprised me because Andrew McCutcheon was my favorite baseball player from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They lived out in Philly. And so I'm like, all right, next day they surprised me, hey, we're going to go watch the Phillies. And so I wasn't, and that was a Saturday night. So Friday and Saturday night, I wasn't expecting to hear anything Saturday. I'm thinking I'll get a call maybe Sunday. So I'll be back home with my family to figure out like, hey, this is pretty cool.
Right.
Well, I get a call from my agent and we're at the Phillies game. And he's like, hey, Colin, I just want to let you know it's not looking good right now. And so, heart sinks a little bit.
Of course.
But I'm like, all right, like I'm with my friends. Like I'm just going to enjoy the night. I'll let them know what my agent just said and we're going to watch the game. Okay. So I tell them we're just like having a good time. And it was really cool. It was like right after I got that bad news, Andrew McCutcheon makes like a diving catch in the outfield. And so we like go nuts. We're like, all right, this is really cool. And then he comes up, he leads the inning off, smokes a home run. The stadium's going nuts. We're going nuts.
Yeah.
My phone rings. It's my agent. And he's like, hey, Colin. He's like, I got you in with the Bills. And so immediately me and my friends just start going nuts. Like people are like looking at us, probably because like at this point, like everything is dissipated.
Yeah.
But we're all like jumping up and down, screaming and like, I'm saying like, yeah, I'm going to the Bills or whatever. So like pretty cool moment. Funny part of this story that I don't tell a lot is like my sister's getting married in like a month.
Okay.
And it was that weekend that I'm heading to Buffalo.
Yeah.
And so I call my mom and first I call my stepdad to tell him. And I don't get a congratulations. I don't get anything. He goes, you have to tell your mother. He's like, she's going to be crushed. I'm like, all right, guys. Like, okay. So I call my mom. She starts crying. Yeah. She starts crying because I'm not going to be at the wedding. And so it's just like a little funny story of like how like I found out really cool moments. And, my parents is crying because I'm going to miss my sister's wedding. But then I get to Buffalo. Okay. And this is them coming off a 6-10 season. Okay. Sean McDermott's there. It was my favorite 4 days of football in my life. I can't speak enough to how amazing the guys in that facility are. Now, some have changed, obviously, in the last 5 years here, 6 years. But like when I got there, they took so much time to get to know everybody in that building. Okay. And so it didn't matter. Again, going back to, hey, I'm walking in. People probably thought I was the next like physical personal trainer or whatever. They probably didn't think I was there to play football. But from the time I got there to the time I left, like every coach knew my story, knew where I was from, knew that I was engaged, to my high school sweetheart. Like they took the time and, I had amazing coaches at Bucknell, I had amazing coaches at Pitt, but it was just like, it was a different level. It was like a next level type of sincerity that can't be faked. And honestly, I played the best football of my life those 4 days. McDermott had me break it down a couple of times. Like those are like memories I'll never forget. Ultimately end up getting cut. Like, hey, I recognize that. McDermott took the time to pull me aside and have a conversation with me. He talked to me about his personal experience, everything he went through, how he related to me and my story. And it was just like to take the time to do that, right? Like most people don't do that, particularly when you're in that position. And to, a couple years later, probably 2 years ago, like I emailed Coach McDermott and he responded to me and we exchange emails every now and then. Like that's just like the type of people that they are. Yeah. But I remember leaving there after I got cut and my friends thought I was full of it, but I was like, that's going to be a special organization. I'm like, mark my words. They're going to be a championship level organization. And they go from 6-10 to 10-6, 12-4, and they haven't looked back since. And like, it's hard to explain, like, culture, I think, is another thing that gets hijacked.
Yeah.
But when you're in the proper environment, you just know. And it's an energy thing. And when you're in it, you can feel it, you can sense it, and it's real, and it's not fake. And that's the only way. I don't really I do talk about culture, but not in that sense, other than when you're somewhere special, you just know it.
Yeah, no, big time. And I mean, that just goes into the success that they've had the last, at this point, like almost 10 years, right? Like you said, shifting from a 6-10 to a 10-6 is an enormous jump in 1 year. And then just being the dominating factor in the AFC East now for the last, whatever it is, 6 years, like they've been awesome. And I'm sure a lot of that is attributed to the way that they treat not just the players, but everyone in that building, like you said. But I'd love to know, like you said, so you end up, they cut you, they have the conversation with you. Now, in your head, was there motivation to be like, I'm gonna try and go back out and play, continue to play somewhere, or were you like, all right, I'm gonna shift into something new?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of different things that were going through my mind at the time. I wanted to keep playing. A large part of it, I was burned out at the time. I think a big part of my story is I
Yeah.
think like 10 out of 13 years, I either broke a bone, tore a ligament, had a surgery, had some type of serious concussion.
Oh my goodness.
And so I was beat up. My body
Yeah.
was hurting. I was crushed emotionally, understood it was a long shot. So then COVID hits, and a lot of those opportunities evaporated. So I got cut in 2019. I actually attempted to make a comeback in 2021. Now, I'm like kind of vague on timeline details, but at this point, like I had really taken a massive leap in my life in terms of like the psychology realm. And like I said, originally when I opened up, when I got cut, like I did that month period, like I was a wreck. I was a mess. Like wasn't taking care of myself, was a psychological poo poo like party for myself. Right. Until I pulled myself out of it and really educated myself, really understood. And then I got to a point where I was like competing freely for the first time. Like I was training, I was healthy, I was hitting new PRs, like in the weight room, like training, like running, jumping. And I was like, I might as well give it one more shot. And so got everything together with my trainers, started going hard, started just doing things that I never thought was possible. And a lot of it just came from the belief that I could. And that's why like I talk about like that, I think our minds are so powerful beyond what we really believe is I saw things now, of course, maturation to, 24, 25, 26. But like I was doing things that, like I never ever would have thought were like possible for myself. And so I was able to get a workout with like the New York Guardians, who were an XFL team at the time. It went well enough to where we were like, all right, hey, maybe we should start trying to get into like an NFL mini camp. And so I don't know if you remember, but there were those hub workouts for like free agents. Okay. So I was about to fly out to San Diego to participate in one of these hub workouts that I was able to get into. In like 2 days before, maybe it was the day before, I pulled my hamstring.
Oh.
And my daughter was due to be born in like a month and a half. And for me, it was like, kind of like this like epiphany. And it was like, I've proven everything to myself that I need to. Like, I know what I'm capable of, what I'm not capable of, what I could have done, what I maybe couldn't have done. Like, I really don't need any other external validation, right? I don't care what anyone says. Like, you could tell me I was the worst football player in the world, and that really would not impact the thought of myself. And so when I got to that space and knowing I wanted to be a good father and be really involved in my daughter's life, I was like, you know what? I'm good. This is a sign. I can end my career and just be content with it and not feel that it was time lost or time wasted. But I was content. And throughout this process is, I started different podcasts, different other things, but really what ultimately led me to was after I finished my career finally, probably 2 years later, I started Athletic Fortitude. Just different iterations ended up leading to Athletic Fortitude.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. And then I guess, do you mind kind of going into your experience, like starting the Athletic Fortitude and kind of what that transition looked like, both from, I guess, an identity perspective for you, and then on the other hand, like going from, not just being an athlete, but a schedule of, all right, every day I'm going to train for, my peak athletic performance. And now it's like, all right, I have new priorities with like work, a family, a wife, kids, like it's just a way different world. So I'd love you to kind of go into detail about that.
Yeah, I think some athletes kind of go opposite ends of the spectrum when their career ends. When they no longer have the structure and routine created for them, they kind of crumble when they have to hold themselves accountable. I'd say for myself and my wife, it drives her absolutely insane, but I am an insanely routine oriented person.
Yeah.
So for me, I just had to create the routines in my life to be able to do the different things. And, when you're starting a family, like, and you'll experience this shortly. And,
Definitely.
many prayers to you and your wife.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You'll learn that sometimes routines kind of get flipped on their head and you have to create and structure and adapt. Okay. And so that is like kind of where the evolution after my career ended, where I had to learn how to be really adaptive in my routines and my priorities. And there's no easy answer. Like, I wish there was like a cookie
Yeah, of
cutter,
course.
this is how you set up. But like for myself, what I did is I just kind of I create non-negotiables. These are my day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year non negotiables. And then my actions have to align with those. And so then I find ways to fit them in. Okay, if I'm much better at working out in the morning than I am in the evening, I'm scheduling time in the morning to work out. If I'm much better with my kids in the evening, if I have to, in order to achieve all the different things, sacrifice time in the morning so I can be with them and be more present in the evening, then that's what I do. Right. And so you have to kind of, again, going back to that self auditing and self awareness, understand what you're good at and where you can give your energy best in certain times, and then create your routine around there. And so that's what I've done. And that's what I did when it comes to working, building a company, being a father, staying in shape, right? All those different things.
Yeah, I love the idea of having those non-negotiables and then making sure you're auditing yourself to note if your actions are following suit for those non-negotiables, right? I think that's super important. And I think, as I kind of enter this new journey into becoming a father soon, like that's going to be even more important, right? It's like I'm going to have less time to, you know, do things that are negotiable items. You know what I mean? Like I can't be sitting there and scrolling on my phone when I should be doing other things, right? Because now I can't just do things for myself. I have, my family to look out for, right? I have a son coming into the world. So it's definitely like such a, mindset and perspective shift. But man, I'm fired up about it, and hearing you talk about it just, fires me up even more for it. I'm excited. But I would also love to hear you talk about, starting a business and creating one like the Athletic Fortitude itself, how that got started, and then, the podcast that kind of aligns with that as well, because I'm kind of in that same, I guess, area where it's like, all right, we started this podcast. We've been kind of slowly growing and chipping away at this thing. And I kind of love to hear your perspective as to like your start and kind of what you've done.
Yeah, I think, one thing is you're always learning and evolving and adapting. And where one thing starts doesn't necessarily mean that's where it's going to finish. But for me, the whole concept was identity. And
Right.
so for me, it became how can I teach athletes how to learn about identity? So where it started was, hey, I thought about doing events for athletes,
Yeah.
right? I thought about creating like retreats for athletes to go to. Some things that I still think are really valuable that I just haven't, really gone back to. But ultimately, like the different iterations of where it started to where it got to, and really what has become is really giving athletes a playbook to establish their identity inside of and outside of sports, and how that identity bleeds into everything that you do, and how you handle any situation is a direct result of who you are. I am the person who does this. Like I'm the
Yes.
person who performs in the clutch. I am the person who is a good person. I am the person who is kind and empathetic, right? Knowing those things, I help people identify and create those things. And so I work with teams, I work with individuals, I work with small groups on helping those athletes identify that. And that's really what it's become. Now, the podcast too has taken many shapes and forms. It started as the Athletic Fortitude Show back in June, I think it was. I pivoted and now I call it the Playbook. And where it started was I just wanted to talk to sports psychologists on a few different topics that
Yeah.
a few different adversities that athletes had dealt with. And really what it turned into is I want it to be the complete human experience. Like that's what I want to talk to. Everything that comes into being a human, being a high performer, successful, healthy in the different domains of what health is, right? I want to talk about everything with everybody who can spill their knowledge into this space so we can really understand what the complete human experience is. And so that's where the podcast and newsletter have transitioned to is what is the complete human experience? How do people live it out differently? And then how can I give people as many playbooks as possible to live the life they want to live?
No, I love the overall like values and missions that you have with the athletic fortitude. I think it's extremely valuable to, not even just athletes who are transitioning into everyday life, but even current athletes, right? There's a lot of skills and, like you said, playbooks out there that you can kind of implement with them that is beneficial to not just their athletic career, but also their personal life. So, I think it encompasses a lot of different things. And I think overall it's extremely valuable. And I'm really appreciative that there are people out there, like you that are trying to spread that mission, to be honest, because I think that's, very overlooked in a lot of different aspects.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's something, had I not experienced a lot of the identity and the performance anxiety type issues and the imposter syndromes, probably wouldn't have cared about it as much and probably would have gone in ear one and out the other if someone would have tried to talk to me about it. But having lived through it and
Right.
understanding its significance and knowing how many other athletes go through it, it's something that is really important to me to help people solve for. I think I don't like saying this a lot, but it changes the trajectory of your life.
No, definitely. I completely agree. And I think kind of implementing the values that you have at Athletic Fortitude for any individual in their personal life, I think, it's only up from there, truthfully. Like it's only things that are going to help benefit you, nothing that's going to hurt you, which is awesome. But I think this is a perfect time to kind of implement our last little segment of the interview, which is going to be Fast Five. So it's just five quick questions. You can answer them, I guess, as short or as long as you want. They can be kind of quick. But the first question, I'll lead it off with, what part of your identity did sports help you discover?
The resilience piece for sure.
Awesome. I assume so. Some of these questions too, you probably answered throughout the interview itself, but just kind of anything at the end you can make a statement about for these questions. Second question, looking back, what moment for you felt like the end, but ended up just being a new beginning?
My senior year at Bucknell, so I'd torn my ACL my junior year. I came back senior year, senior camp. I had what we had thought was a torn ACL again. It ended up not being a torn ACL. It ended up just being a sprain. And I thought I was ready to be done. I thought that was the end. And then ultimately it was just like new life, new beginning. Awesome senior year. Rest is the rest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, number three, when everything around you is chaotic, what's one mental habit that brings you back to center?
Sometimes I kind of like the chaos. It's a
Yeah,
reframe technique. It's like for me, it's an
love
opportunity
that.
to it's an opportunity for me to, prove I am all the different things that I say I am. So when it's chaos and everything's going nuts or nothing's going right, it's like perfect. Hey, here's my opportunity to earn everything that I want to be.
Love that. That's awesome. I love that perspective. Now, fourth question, what belief about yourself did you have to unlearn in order to grow as an athlete or a person? So basically any limiting beliefs.
Oh, I would say I would say from actually, I'll take it in a different lens. I had to learn I didn't know everything and that I
Okay.
really know nothing. And I'm in a
Yeah.
constant form of learning is
Yeah.
what I would say I had to change is, I used to, it's a family genetic trait. I used to think I knew more than I did. And I realized there's a lot I don't know. Uh, it's actually really exciting to become a lifelong learner as opposed to thinking you know everything.
Well, yeah, I feel like curiosity is our most beneficial tool as humans. So I love to hear that. That's awesome. And then last question to wrap it all up. What does success feel like to you now? And how has that changed since you first started in athletics?
That's a great question. I think there's all different types of success. And I think there's so many different ways to define success, right? I think, 5 years ago, or whatever, when I was playing, what success looked like was really only winning or championships or whatever. And I would say if I were to break down the different areas of my life that I've used success, because I don't think that there's one element, I believe that there's different areas of my life that has success is, you know, being like a father, right? Like that's my most important number one above all else, like being a father, right? Being a good husband, right? Being present in those moments, that's what success looks like to me. Being at home, spending time with my girls and my son coming up here and my wife, like laughing, enjoying, crying, like experience all those emotions with them, right? Professionally, right? Just again, outcomes matter, but just feeling like I'm challenging myself, intellectually. Like, am I challenging myself? Am I pushing myself? You know, am I trying to grow in my professional space? Again, similar mentally, like, hey, am I reading? Am I writing? Am I doing podcasts, right? Like, am I striving to learn, right? Emotionally, right? Am I becoming more in control of my emotions instead of letting my emotions control me? Physically, am I hitting my metrics that I want physically? And so that's kind of how I break it down.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a big growth aspect for you. And again, congratulations to you and your wife as well. I know you guys are expecting your next child very soon. So congratulations to the two of you. Wish you nothing but the best. And Colin, just thank you very much for coming on, man, and having these conversations. I really think your story is unique, and what you're doing now with your mission and values with the Athletic Fortitude is awesome. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. So I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about all that with me.
Nah, dude, my pleasure. I appreciate you having me, and love sharing my message. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you. So thank you for coming on. And for everyone else, we'll tune in next week.